What's Oman's vision in this hydrogen story, and how is a super company going to help? Stay with me. With me is Dr. Firas Al Abduwani, the Acting Managing Director of Hydrogen Oman, aka Hydrom. How do you do?
Very well, thank you.
Welcome to the show, and we are getting straight to the questions about hydrogen. What is it? What is this molecule all about, and why is it important?
Fantastic. First of all, thank you very much, Fahmi, for hosting me over here. And it's a pleasure to be promoting Green Hydrogen Summit. From our perspective, hydrogen is a very interesting energy vector or pathway, a potential for decarbonization. So the whole story really revolves around multiple things. From a global perspective, it's one of the tools that humanity is looking at decarbonizing the world and trying to get the temperature and the climate change under control. It's also a great opportunity for economic diversification. So when we look at the hydrogen story and why this molecule is important, we look at what it's used traditionally for and what our ambitions as a humanity for it are. Historically, hydrogen has been used in a very niche space. So the global consumption by 2020 of hydrogen was between 80 and 90 million tons per annum. That's a very modest quantity, and it's very niche areas. It's used, for example, in the petrochemicals industries in refining. It's used to create urea and fertilizers out of that. So very limited use, which is primarily as a primary feedstock going into these chemical reactions. Our ambitions are much greater than that because it has the potential of helping in abate the emissions from hard to abate sectors. That involves steel manufacturing, heavy transportation. So there are different elements. If you Google, the audience Google something such as the hydrogen ladder, you'll be able to see the different sectors that hydrogen can address.
Okay, has hydrogen ever been used as a fuel? I remember growing up, the flammability and danger of hydrogen. It's still in the back of my mind. So how is that resolved, or was that just a myth?
No, so hydrogen is a flammable gas. It's more important, is also a very difficult molecule to contain. If you remember from the school days, we were together. So it's one of these molecules that easily impregnates different containers and gets out of them. It causes brittleness. But all of these things have been solved. So a few decades ago, the safety aspects of hydrogen have been resolved and taken care of. And as you know, technology keeps on evolving. So I don't think that is an issue. It's just that it was not cost effective as a solution to be used for this. I'm sure there are some areas where it was. I think in rocket propulsion and other elements, it was used for a while over there.
Because the budgets were big. Yeah. It seems like you're talking about scalability. Can you talk about the scalability and how it can actually be of importance to us in the world and to Oman?
Sure. So this is a very important question, particularly if you talk about green hydrogen specifically. So hydrogen traditionally has been always created from fossil fuels, primarily coal, and then gas, and then oil. And what they do is they gasify it, and what you do is you reform this hydrocarbon. You heat it up, you put it in close contact with steam, and they reshuffle their bonds, reform in a way. So hydrogen gets ejected out, and then the hydrocarbon bonds with the oxygen, and you get carbon monoxide and carbon dioxide coming out. For every kilogram of hydrogen that you produce between 8 to 12 kilograms of carbon dioxide.
Intense.
It's very intense.
Okay.
So that's why they call it gray hydrogen, and we'd say close to 95% of hydrogen up in 2020 was all what's considered gray hydrogen. And that causes a lot of emissions, and it's used in these niche areas, and the transportation of hydrogen is very limited. It's a very localized use of this molecule. Now, as humanity is looking at using it in different elements, and they want to transport it and use it to decarbonize the hard-to-abate sectors, what's happening there is that we need to find new ways of how to make it clean with less emissions associated. And you have two different ways. One of them is you still keep this chemical reaction approach, and then you capture this carbon and store it or use it. And that's where blue hydrogen and other types of hydrogen. Of course, hydrogen is colorless, it's the same hydrogen. The colors are used to just identify how it was made.
Right. So in other words, how dirty it actually is pulled out. So from oil, I'm hearing it's black or gray. From gas, it's blue.
No.
Okay.
So from all fossil fuels,
Yes.
it can be gray
Yeah.
or it can also be blue. The difference is that when it's gray, you allow all of these
Carbon escape.
carbon
Yeah,
emissions to
right.
escape. And if you capture it, and now this is where the different countries differ, they have different standards. You capture 95% of it, you capture 80% of it. So there's some variation around the world. If you capture it based on the specifications of that country and you store it and you prove that you have stored it and kept it away, then it becomes blue.
So the colors are depending on how much carbon actually is saved from the environment.
I would say the method in how it was.
So in green is technically great for the environment because it's zero carbon.
Correct. And I did not describe green specifically. Green is very different. Green is not made using this thermal or chemical process. It's done electrolytically. So what that means is that you take water, distilled water, and you take electricity and you split.
Chemistry in school.
Again.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Is there
So
any? Yes,
it's
please.
electrical chemistry rather than thermal chemistry.
Yeah.
And what you do over here is you split the oxygen and hydrogen. You get oxygen coming out as a product and you get hydrogen going out as a product. And there are multiple types of electrolytic hydrogen. So if you use nuclear power to do this electrolysis, then it's called pink hydrogen.
Pink. Oh, okay.
If you use 100% renewable energy, so wind,
Yeah,
solar,
yeah.
then it's called green.
Right.
And if you use the grid, which is mixed, then it's called brown.
Mm.
And the colors just keep on going. What's really important from my perspective is that you have green because that has zero carbon
And that's what we
associated
want to
with the
work
process.
on. Yeah.
And of course, you get some things in the process that get captured, and then you have the other colors. And what we really should look at across all of them is what is the carbon content associated with. So rather than
Absolutely.
colors,
Yeah.
how many kilograms of carbon or methane or other emissions, the carbon dioxide equivalent that is associated with this production.
Too technical on that, but
I'm
at least
afraid
we
so.
understand that the colors are got to do with how much carbon is not escaping to the environment. The carbon capture, which is what the finally I'm starting to understand what that means because I couldn't actually picture that. Now, with hydrogen as a fuel or hydrogen as a carrier, what is it? I don't understand, and how could it be used
Sure.
once it's out?
So hydrogen, now that we're looking at using it, it still has the primary use. We have a lot of gray hydrogen used today. And what obviously makes a lot of sense is that in addition to looking at these new markets, first you focus on the existing market.
Yes.
So you go to the existing market where hydrogen today is used, and you say, what? You need to decarbonize. Let's replace your gray hydrogen, your dirty hydrogen, with this cleaner hydrogen, whether it is green, pink, blue, whatever makes sense, economic sense, you go and replace it. Then you have the new industries and sectors where you can use hydrogen. And those basically are heavy industry. This
Yes.
is heavy manufacturing that includes steel, for example. Those are the two that really come to mind.
That's why we need the scalability to be able to actually
So we need the scalability
that.
to drive the prices down. So
all that
gray
is.
hydrogen costs around $1 per kilogram, whereas green hydrogen, for example, is anywhere between $2.50 to $6, $7.
Nice, you're giving us a reference. Where do we want the green hydrogen now?
So you want it to be cheaper because
Yeah.
ultimately what you want is that you do not want to subsidize the transition into a new product. You want economies to benefit from it. And you have what we call a learning curve. You need to have the scale. You need people to inject cash into it to bring the scale into the supply chains. You want the technologies to get the investments to evolve, all of these new technologies that can
Understood.
improve efficiencies.
Yeah.
And then you will reach price points, and analysts expect that by 2035, green hydrogen, with all of the proper investments and backgrounds and technology breakthroughs, will be cheaper than gray hydrogen.
Speaking of investments, congratulations. Hydrogen Oman was launched on the 23rd of October, and it's called Hydrom. So now with this new company, which I'm calling it a super organization for the future, what is Hydrom's role? How does it connect to PDO and EDO and the hydrogen story of Oman?
Sure, fantastic. Thank you for asking and for the congratulations. The whole team is really proud of
And the
first
nation.
step. And the nation, thank
Yes.
you. And it's just the first step. So you mentioned the word super. I hope that we enable a super economy in Oman. That's our role. So Hydrom, as the brand name was basically created after following directions from His Majesty to create an entity that helps develop the sector And that was translated into orchestrating the sector. So our role is really an orchestrator. And it was also decided that we should be incubated and be part of EDO, so Energy Development Oman. Energy Development Oman was originally created as a entity or a vehicle that is responsible for the government's share in PDO. The government owns 60% of Petroleum Development Oman, and that is now held within EDO, Energy Development Oman. The beautiful thing about EDO is that it has a diverse board representation. You have 2 board seats from the Ministry of Finance, 2 board seats from the Ministry of Energy and Minerals, and 1 board seat from OIA. So 3 of the most important influencers when it comes to this particular sector, the energy sector in Oman. Being incubated there is fantastic. It gives us alignment with these key decision makers. And it also gives us a space where we can run. You know, when you start, and you've been in startups before, and you know how it is. So it's really important for you to have the helpful conditions to nurture you.
So it's a startup, not a regulator?
So it's a company that is going to orchestrate the sector. And because we were just launched, we are obviously a startup. We have our, a startup means you just started recently.
Yeah.
And yes.
Elaborate on orchestrate.
Sure. So if you look at the hydrogen economy and you have multiple players, who are the players that are there? You have the international developers who want to come in and to participate in this sector, either through investments or providing technology or providing operations. You have the local companies who aspire to do the same and have the capabilities. You additionally have the supply chain, both international and local. So you have, in Oman, you have, for example, the grid company, you have the water company, the gas company for gas pipelines. You have multiple, and you have the ports. You have the different government entities around. You have the land itself. How is the land?
Sounds like you're talking about the whole economy.
So you needed someone to be in the center of all of these different stakeholders and to make Oman truly an easy place to do business in and to fulfill certain objectives the nation wants. So Oman wants to ensure that energy security is met.
Yes.
Oman wants to ensure that there's diversification of the economy. We want to ensure that decarbonization is taking place. We want to make sure that the end products we're delivering are very competitive.
And high quality.
And we want to ensure that we have innovation.
Yes.
So to do that, you need to have a structured approach to the market. And you cannot allow multiple players to just play haphazardly.
And that's how Hydrom's coming in.
And that's how Hydrom. So, when the stakeholders, the government officials looked at it, the private and the government entities looked at it, they decided that we need this orchestrator, and I can describe more. Absolutely.
And we'll come with more of a description right after these breaks. Welcome back to the Hydrogen Story, where my guest is Dr. Firas Al Abduwani, the Acting Managing Director of Hydrogen Oman, aka Hydrom. Welcome to the show. Now, previously, we spoke about the orchestration of Hydrom, and I cut you off during the break. Please continue.
All good. So, before the break, we spoke about the multiple stakeholders we have.
Yeah.
And this is to show the complexity of the economy or the ecosystem around us. So what are the roles of Hydrom? The first role, obviously, is to be aware of the market situation. So one of our first objectives are to understand what is the world's appetite, the external world for hydrogen, whether it's international markets or the local markets. So that's our duty, to be always continuously checking the market from a demand perspective, a supply perspective, technology evolutions. We will be responsible to putting out, similar to how, for example, the electricity sector companies, they put a 5-year statement or a 7-year statement where they talk about projections, and that is to enable us to do our next role, which is planning. So once you know where the market is heading or you have some feel for it, you start planning, and that's our next role. We plan, and then we raise our plans to our auction board and our regulator, the Ministry of Energy and Minerals, and our board. What our plans are, they get approved, and we move ahead. So we plan the market accordingly, we structure the project.
This is all done?
No, so this is on an evolving basis. So we do this continuously. So we do it, let's say, on an annual basis. So for this year, yes, we have done that. Although we were launched officially in October, we started our work, let's say, the company was incorporated in June, but we really started working in July timeframe, August. So we've done quite a bit of that, and the ministry, before we were formed, were taking that responsibility, and they passed parts of it to us. So then we do the structuring of the projects, how these projects should be. We look at the land in Oman. So
Do we have projects? And what projects are we involved with?
Very good question. So I'll come to the projects that are existing, but when I talk about projects, I'm talking about the project structure. So how do we want as Oman to invite the industry to participate? FDI, the local companies, we have national champions. We want to grow our local companies, the state-owned ones, and also the private sector. So we structure it by saying what are the rules of the game? How do we want people to play in this economy in Oman?
So you're slash regulator also?
We have a tinge of regulation to us. We prefer to call it orchestration.
I think it's nice that it's in-house. At least it helps you operate faster.
And for us, the word regulator is definitely with the Ministry of Energy. So they're the policy maker and regulator.
Okay, got you.
We orchestrate. So we get quite a bit of our role through, delegation from the ministry. The ministry could do a lot of what we do. But if you look at how the market operates as a private sector entity or a government-owned entity, we can execute this role more efficiently and more attractively to the industry.
Could I ask you, where is this market heading in, and are we kind of sure that we're heading in the right direction with it?
So the hydrogen market is nascent, and it is unclear because if you look at it, particularly 2 years ago when I started looking at this market through my role in OQ Alternative Energy, you had a whole wide range of expectations of what could happen. I think the market has evolved now in 2022 where things are more concrete, but it's still a very flexible market. We in Oman are looking at the 2 degrees, curbing the emissions at the 2 degrees
You're talking about net zero, 1.5 C, 2 degrees.
So we're looking at 2 degrees instead of 1.5 C. We hope that as humanity we reach 1.5, but we think the most realistic approach and how the economies are moving is more towards the 2. And we're looking at the sustainable development scenario, the one which balances economy with the emissions reductions targets. So if you look at that, we believe that the world will have around 400 million tons of hydrogen consumption by 2050.
And Oman will provide how much of that?
That's a very good question. So first, how do we break this market? We believe this 400, about 46% of it will be green, 46% of it will also be blue, and then you have still a small quantity that's still gray. And then this green, 50% of it is tradable and 50% of it is localized. Same with the blue.
Thank you for the breakdown. Nice one.
So our market, the global market that we want to address is 100 million tons.
Wow.
And we want at a minimum to be providing at least 10% of that.
Okay.
And I did not finish all of our roles on orchestration.
Yeah, and the projects. Yeah, this seems to be another show. The projects we're in, the Hydroms in.
Okay. If you don't mind, I'll just
Please.
3 more bullet points
This
about
is your
orchestration,
show.
And then we go into the projects. So we have taking the land, we have the master plan of what we want to do. We reflect that on the land. So the ministry did a wonderful job along with a committee of different stakeholders, including the Ministry of Housing, Ministry of Defense, Environmental Authority, and others, to identify lands that could be suitable for Oman for renewable energy and for green hydrogen. And they identified 50,000 square kilometers for green hydrogen, an additional 15 or 16,000 to provide the grid with clean energy.
Foundations getting set.
Absolutely, and that was a wonderful task that they managed. Now they're handing parcels of those lands to us, Hydrom, to basically delineate, break it into different... Delineate, so basically clean up, because not all of it is used. So 50,000 is gross, and then you have different things, either you have roads or corridors of grids and whatever, pipelines. So we identify what is really usable, and we make them into congruent and usable blocks that are related to each other. You can make out of it common infrastructure. That is one of our other roles. So first we clean up the lands, and then we set up what their dimensions are for blocks to be economic, have the scale, economies of scale, and then design it in such a way that we can have a common infrastructure. So not each project has its own pipeline or its own private grid. We have economies of scale in these utilities that make them usable. And then the last...
I just see good foresight. That's what I like,
Well, it's group work that was done by multiple stakeholders.
It's a very different angle of coming into a great project for the future. I love it.
And to be honest, Oman has been working in green hydrogen for 2 years prior to that.
Wow, good info.
And what became clear is that it needs to be orchestrated so that we can maximize the value for Oman, for the world, and to avoid losses of potential value capture. And then the last role that I would like to mention is basically aggregation of data. So there's a lot of data that is generated here.
Wow.
So you conduct
Yeah.
wind campaigns, you conduct solar assessment. This data needs to be captured so that when you have the next round of auctions, and that's a role we do, we auction these projects out or these lands. You want to build on the data that was collected from previous projects once they're up and running and campaigns that we run. So auctioning is what we do, and you asked about projects continuously. So there are projects that...
Like you're active, something's happening now.
So what has happened is that on the 6th of November, just a few days ago, actually this week, at the time we're doing this interview, we launched our first bid round, public auction bid round. From our side, we started with new projects. So you're asking, what are your projects? We don't have any today because we're still launching these. And we're launching 2 blocks in Duqm, and then we have 2 to 4 coming up in April in the Dhofar region.
Okay, very nice.
But there are prior projects that exist, what we call legacy initiatives, one that the government through different agents, so whether it's OQ Alternative Energy,
in Highport and
or so that is OQ Alternative Energy, and then you have ACME that went through CZAD. Both Highport and ACME contracted their land reservations through OPAZ, CZAD.
Wow.
So now you have these different initiatives that exist and regularizing
and new
them.
players and just pushing to help the economy.
Well, they were entrepreneurial. They were very foresightful. They knew that this is something that will happen. They knocked on the doors of Oman. They saw the potential.
With that, how prepared does that make Oman be? And how is our long-term game?
So the first question is that why did they come to Oman?
Okay.
And because Oman is one of the best 5 countries in the world when it comes to renewable energy resources for hydrogen production, or in general. But for hydrogen, the proximity of these lands to an abundant water resource, the sea, that can be distilled or demineralized to be used. So they came because they knew Oman's potential and they had access to the market and the stakeholders. So they came in early, and the government and the nation appreciates that. So what has been done is that to also make everything conform, it's been now regularized. So we also have a parallel process where the ministry and the different stakeholders have handed these initiatives to Hydrom. So we have 2 parallel tracks. We're harmonizing the previous initiative, the legacy ones, and we're running our auction process. And we have a system that is best really described in a presentation rather than verbally. And we leave that for the summit itself.
Absolutely. Make sure we see you over there. Now, just coming in to this long-term game, I mean, you said out of 400 million tons, we're looking at 10% of the 100 million. Is that our long-term plan?
It will depend on the market because we're talking about 2050. So we have a much more concrete, immediate target, which is 1 million tons a minimum by 2030. But yes, we're starting with this, and if the market is larger than we anticipate it to be, or we find that we have a much bigger value proposition to the world, then actually the 10 million tons we talked about, or 8 million tons by 2050, that represents 1/3 of Oman's potential. We can easily scale up to 25 million tons of hydrogen. So we have that flexibility to swing up and serve more to the global demand. But today we're looking in the immediate term, and for us to deliver in 2030, we need to have our projects awarded by 2023.
Yeah, I see that.
So within the next 14 months, we need to deliver enough projects by an auction process that is fair and transparent and is equitable to the different parties involved to deliver 1 million tons. And we have decided that it will go across 6 different blocks. So 170,000 tons of hydrogen per block. And we're not defining the end product. They can choose to do it in hydrogen itself, which is not feasible, or ammonia, or methanol, or use it for local industries, which we highly recommend. Can you bring your steel industry over here, or think of other end products that come further, forward-connected industries that we want to bring into Oman.
I hope everybody is still with us. A lot of numbers and percentages and all stuff. You can see previous episodes to try and understand what's going on. I ask the same question repetitively all the time, and Dr. Firas's take was actually quite meticulously clear for me at this point. So check out the other episodes and you'll be actually with us right now. Just want to come back to Hydrom. Impact versus size.
Okay, can you elaborate what you mean by
impact versus... Is Hydrom going to be a massive company and going to give a massive impact?
The super question you mentioned.
Yes, super company.
So we see ourselves as being a very small and agile company. We don't foresee ourselves to be beyond 25, 30 people in this organization. What we are here is to do a super job, and by creating super partners. So our local champion, we want to ensure that we have the mechanisms to have a national champion from a development perspective that steps up and fills this role, and we have that. We want to look at our existing infrastructure, utilities, so whether it is the grid, the OQ gas networks with their gas, do they want to evolve into hydrogen pipelines as well? We have Marafiq, Majis, multiple stakeholders who can benefit and grow tremendously. So our role is actually to be the catalyst for super companies to exist.
So with all my shows, my angle is how can the citizen benefit? How can they actually get something from hydrogen? What can they get from Hydrom?
That's an excellent question. And for us, the impact on society is one of our cornerstones. It's something that we aspire and is our mandate to deliver. And what I want to make clear is that hydrogen is not, for example, such as gasoline that you get out of a fuel station that you immediately use.
Thank you for that clarity.
It is something that could be used. In Europe, for example, hydrogen is being considered, and in cold nations, as a heating fuel, so that you use it to fuel instead of LPG or other forms.
Okay, let's see what it is.
But the primary use of hydrogen is really industrial. And the benefits that the society will get are not direct use of hydrogen, but instead these will be uses through the industrial application. So can they be part of the employment? Can they be
jobs?
Absolutely, jobs. Can they be part of the R&D? Can they be part of the entrepreneurship to be a part of the supply chain?
Thank you.
So these are the elements that we are working very hard to ensure that the Omani population gets into.
Jobs, R&D, and the entrepreneurship. There's many sides to this hydrogen economy. Now, for the future, how do we know, and we've got 1 minute to go, how do we know that Hydrom is successful?
That's a very good question, and it's something that we look at always. So for us to be successful, we need to match our forecast or beyond. So one, if
walk the walk when you talk the talk.
Absolutely. So are we able to deliver the hydrogen competitively? Are we able to attract the different industries? Are we able to create these super companies you mentioned? Have we made Oman a hub where the manufacturing
knowledge transfer? Another question I'd love to ask for another show. Maybe we'll see how it goes.
You can get Dr. Sausan, who's in charge of the Oman Hydrogen Center. She can represent the academic side of things.
Fantastic.
You have Dr. Khalil Hanshi from Highfly. Wonderful speakers who can touch on those elements.
Well, we should look to the future and what hydrogen brings into us regarding the green economy. I'm definitely benefiting from it because of me getting into the media, asking the questions. So I really appreciate your time with us, Dr. Firas Al Abduwani, the acting managing director of Hydrogen Oman, aka Hydrom. Make sure you know this brand. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Fahmi.
My name is Fahmi Al-Ma'awali. See you there.